Hello and welcome back to episode 13 of the Welsh Premiership podcast. Today we're joined by Welsh sports broadcaster and Welsh Premiership guru in Phil Steele. Phil, how are you?
Great to see you, boys, and it's wonderful that you're doing a podcast based around the Welsh Premiership. Because it is an underrepresented league in terms of media coverage and general interest, and it is such a good league as well. So there are lots of stories, lots of interest, and those who do follow it, say what a great entertaining league and what great entertaining rugby is played in it. So it's great that you're giving it some credence and credibility.
Thank you.
Last year in the Premiership then, Phil, Cardiff finished top. Obviously, the league didn't actually finish because of COVID. But what did you make of the season as a whole?
Well, the funny thing is, it seems so long ago now, doesn't it? What was it, last March that it finished? It seems like a lifetime ago. I think Cardiff were the outstanding team, well coached by Steve Law, who's a bit of a character himself, very old school coach. Doesn't take any nonsense. I think they were the outstanding team. I like the look of Aberavon. I like the way they played the game as well, and Carmarthen Quins and RGC, who always seem to throw the ball about. But if you were to look at the outstanding team, I think Cardiff would have won it fairly comfortably, even though they did lose to Carmarthen Quins. What was it, January, February time? They were the outstanding team. A very good squad as well, all round.
Yeah, are there any players that stood out for you last season? And what players should we look out for next season?
Well, the one who stood out for me was Rowan Jenkins, the Aberavon prop forward, who was, a few of us were asked to name a couple of some players to put in the All-Stars team. And Hayden, Rowan was the only one who was picked in all four of the teams that were selected. So he was terrific, and there's no surprise that he got a temporary regional deal, didn't he? With I think with the Ospreys a few months ago. So he was great. Hayden Pugh as well for Carmarthen Quins. He'd been around a long time now, Hayden, but he led the side with great gusto. And also Tom Haberfield, who obviously was a regional player with the Ospreys, came back down to the Premiership when he didn't get a contract with the Ospreys to play for Cardiff Blues, and he was a terrific to play for Cardiff FC rather. He was a terrific player, great fella, could play on the wing or scrum half. So those are the three sort of players who caught my eye.
And what sides then do you see being able to challenge Cardiff then next season whenever that restarts? Or do you think Cardiff will be far and away at the top again?
Well, the interesting thing is that Cardiff haven't, as it stands now, Cardiff are struggling to settle on a squad, aren't they? Because nobody knows what the game is going to look like structure-wise at club level, right the way down since COVID. So it's going to be very, very difficult to predict. Merthyr, I think, will be there or thereabouts and pretty strong because of the budget that they have there. I think Carmarthen Quins will be there as well. They've always got a good forward pack, and RGC as well. They've got a very good setup up there to develop players through, and a good coaching setup as well. But it is very, very difficult to sort of predict until we know basically what squads are working with, and it's difficult to predict what sort of Premiership we'll even end up with next year, because probably nothing is off the table now in terms of how the game will look when we come back from this COVID situation, because I can't see the Premiership being played until September. Yeah. I know that today, funny enough, the English Championship have made notice that they're going to start playing in January. They're going to have to fund the testing themselves, so that's going to come out of the money that's given by the Westminster government. But I don't think anything like that is on offer for the Premiership. So it's just really difficult. I think we will be starting from scratch to a great degree.
Phil, can you try and explain to us a bit more on how COVID has affected the clubs in the Premiership and the grassroots clubs in Wales?
Yeah, well, obviously financially, that's the first thing. If clubs are not getting money through the gate, they're not getting money put over the bar. That's particularly for community clubs lower down the level. They're obviously going to be struggling financially. But worse than that, I feel, and more worrying, is the fact that the game is already hemorrhaging players, particularly, as you probably all know, particularly at that 16 to 19 age group. But the big worry I have for community clubs is those players who are in their 30s, 34, 35, the tight head prop, who says, I'm going to retire at the end of this season, and then August comes and his mates are out training and he says, I'll have another season, and the big second row says, yeah, I'll have another season. Those tranche of players in their 30s to maybe 40s, down the levels, I think we're going to lose a lot of those, because if you're say a prop forward who's coming to the 35, 36, and he's had a year, 18 months it'll be before September out of the game, I think we're going to lose a lot of that type of players, the one who just gives it the one more go. And sadly, often those are players who are linchpins at clubs and tend to galvanise teams and galvanise the clubs, So it's a big worry to me, not only the financial aspect of it, but the player pool. And of course, anything that diminishes the club game at first team level will have a knock-on effect down the levels. Because if clubs fold because of financial impact or because they can't put out teams, that club might have had a mini rugby team, mini juniors all the way through. It's bound to affect that as well, And my big belief in Welsh rugby, that's why I'm such a big advocate for the club game, is that every player, every Gethin Jenkins, every Sam Warburton, every Lewis Rees-Zammit comes from somewhere, comes from a club. And because the primary schools don't do so much with rugby these days as they did in my day, every primary school in Cardiff actually had a under 11s team who play a full fixture list, full 15-a-side. The clubs are generally these days the first contact that a player has with organised rugby. And so anything that diminishes the club game, whether it be lower bar take-ins or shortage of players, will affect what's going on at the bottom of the pyramid, the very bottom, where we first get the kids interested.
Okay, moving on to your playing career. What are your favourite memories playing for Newport, and who are the best players you played alongside?
My career, such as it was, I got as far as the Wales B squad when I left Cardiff Met in 1983, and then I had a couple of bad injuries. I had a groin injury and a knee injury. But after the knee injury, I got it's pretty well documented in the book I wrote. I got actual clinical depression, and I was never the same player after that. Never had the same confidence. Got back fitness-wise, but was never ever the same player on the field. I lost a lot of confidence, whatever. The biggest memory I have played for Newport is, and it's interesting today because we're mourning the death of the great Ray Prosser, who used to coach that Pontypool side. Was playing my third game for Newport was Pontypool at home. And being a Cardiff boy, being an Ely boy, Glamorgan Wanderers was my first club. I had no idea, even though I love rugby and I've always loved rugby history, I had no idea of the rivalry between Newport and Pontypool. I knew of the rivalry between Newport and Cardiff. I knew of the rivalry between Cardiff and Swansea, and Swansea Llanelli, Neath Swansea, Glamorgan Wanderers Penarth as it was in my day. I knew all about those rivalries, but I had no idea of the rivalry between Newport and Pontypool. And my third game, we ran out at Rodney Parade. Bear in mind, I played for the Wanderers, and the Wanderers fixture list. You play all the first-class clubs. In fact, the season before, I played for the Wanderers. The first time we ever beat Cardiff at the Arms Park in 1982. And similarly with the college fixture list they play all the top first-class clubs. But with the Wanderers, then you perhaps play Cardiff on a Wednesday night, Aberavon on a Saturday, and the following Saturday you probably play something like Clifton or Newton Abbott, one of the lesser teams. So it was a cup final game was every sort of other week or a fortnight type of thing, the big games. Same with the college. But with Newport, every game was a massive game in front of a big crowd. Pontypool, so we ran out to Pontypool, and I can remember it was a home game, Rodney Parade. There must have been about 7,000 or 8,000 there. And I can remember thinking, where's all the Newport fans? It seemed to be just a home crowd for Pontypool, these chants of Pooler, when we ran out, and I thought this is a bit different. And I can remember Spike Watkins, our captain and hooker, went on to captain Wales then later on that season, throwing the ball in the very first line out, and nobody jumped for the ball. It was just a free-for-all. The ball was, you might as well kept the ball hanging on a piece of string in the air there because nobody was interested. You had Graham Price and Rhys Morgan, the two props at the front. You had David Waters and John Perkins, the second rows having a go in the middle. You had Jeff Squire and Mark Brown and Roger Powell having a go at the back. It was just an absolute free-for-all, and it continued like that for most of the game. And I can remember coming off the field, and Roger Powell, a great Newport flanker, played nearly 400 games for the Black and Hammers, coming off and taking his shirt off, and he had like almost like Adidas stripes down his back of red, because those are the days of rucking. And I said to him, "Go, Rog, that was a bit of a hard game." Yeah, and he said, "I never forget." In his Gwent draw, he said, "Steely, it was nothing, man, nothing." He said, "That was quite tame for Pontypool Newport games." He said,
"You should have seen the other guy."
Yeah, you should see the other guy. Yeah. So that was my about him, and that was like, even though I think I was 22 at the time then. Even though I played in first class rugby and played virtually all the first class games and played against internationals, that was my first sort of introduction to what it was like to play for a top first class club against another top first class club in a Welsh derby. That was, and that sort of always stuck with me. But one of my biggest memories as a player, one of my fondest memories was playing for the Wanderers. Like I just said, when we beat Cardiff, we beat them 15-9 on the 1st of September 1982, and on the Arms Park. And I can remember in the changing rooms after, Wanderers committee man and the president, Sir Tasker Watkins, who became president of the Welsh Rugby, and Sir Tasker Watkins won a VC in World War II for taking a German machine gun nest single-handed. One of the greatest of all Welshmen of all time. And Tasker was in the change rooms after in his Wanderers tie, virtually in tears, because his beloved Wanderers, of which he'd been president for so many years, had beaten Cardiff, something he probably never thought would happen. And I can remember thinking then, I was only 21, 22, thinking, blimey, it's when you're a player, you just go out and you play and you win or you lose or whatever. You just sort of wound up in the game. You don't think of the history and all the backstory for these clubs. And I can remember thinking to myself there, yes, what we've just done out there means a lot, means a lot. And it was years later then. It was years later when I sort of got that sort of feeling that Tasker must have had himself, because when I was working for Scrum 5, then we covered the Barbarians against Wales game at Cardiff, and it was Shane Williams, his last outing. He played for the Barbarians. His last outing in big rugby. And I had the honour of going on the pitch and doing the post-match interview with him, and he's still there in his Barbar's kit, and he hasn't come off the field yet. And the interview went over the stadium tannoy, and I don't know why I said it, because you're supposed to be professional and everything, but I just felt so quite emotional that this Shane Williams, and I said to him at the end of the interview, I said, "Shane," I said, and all the young people in the ground must have thought, "What the hell is he on about?" Because I said, "Shane," I said, "people of my era never thought we'd ever see Gerald Davies again, and we have in you. Thank you for what you've done." And that so I was showing the emotion that probably Tasker Watkins had shown all those years ago, after his beloved Wanderers had beaten Cardiff. So those are a few memories. Most of my big memories are funny. They sort of, a lot of the memories are off the field memories, of the characters and.
Yeah, that's rugby, isn't it?
That is rugby, To play for the college side was very special as well. South Glamorgan Institute in those days, when you pull on that shirt and you think this is the shirt that Gareth Edwards has worn, and the late J.J. Williams and Clive Rowlands, and later on then John Devereux, John Humphreys, Ryan Jones, that was always to feel you're standing on the shoulders of giants, and of course the college always played this fit 15-man open style of rugby, which was great for me as an attacking fullback, or pacifist non-tackling fullback, as people used to know.
That's all fullbacks, isn't it?
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. No, there was one, a bloke called Williams.
I don't know who you mean there. Sorry.
Yeah.
And you've been a pundit now for a fair while, Phil.
Yeah, I worked for the BBC for 25 years. Yeah, I was originally a teacher, but started working for the BBC in 1995.
Do you have any particularly fond memories from pundits, from being a pundit, and any games you remember?
The one I remember most as a reporter was well, there's two really. One for BBC was I did back in the days of the Heineken Cup, Pontypridd played Munster at Sardis Road, and it was I described it was like a mini international. It was like Wales against Ireland, apart from the fact it was Munster playing a club side, and that was phenomenal. Pontypridd won something like 25-23, a last minute conversion by Brett Davey. And the standard of the game, the atmosphere there was absolutely brilliant. And Pontypridd were already out of the pool. They couldn't qualify for the pool, but it was a full house at Sardis Road, and that was absolutely fantastic. My biggest memory, though, as a commentator was, and it wasn't even working for BBC Wales. This was a freelance. I can work for anybody. So it was Wales New Zealand 2005. And I was working for RTE, Radio Television Arran, because Ireland were playing the All Blacks the week after, and they wanted me there on the Saturday afternoon just to show how the All Blacks were shaping up, when they played Ireland next week. So there was only a few update reports. It was great. It was getting paid to go and watch the All Blacks, basically. And Wales got an absolute hammering. They lost about 45-3. I think Rico Gia scored 3 for New Zealand. But on the bench for Wales that day was a young lad who came through the Premiership, never came through the academies, called Lee Byrne, and he was a Scarlets fullback then. And Lee Byrne was quite poignant for me because I taught him in primary school. I taught him in St Mary's Roman Catholic Primary School back in around about 1989, 1990. So I would have been probably the first person who as his under 11s primary school teacher, who put his first organised game of rugby together for him, And Lee was an interesting character because he used to have special needs reading help in school. Later, many years later, when he played for in France for Clermont, he was diagnosed as dyslexic. But he used to have special needs reading help, and he wasn't very confident in the classroom. But put him on the games field, and he was fantastic. It was like watching a mini version of an international player play. He had all the skills. He could take and give a pass. In fact, he could screw kick, spiral punt at the age which you don't see in the game so much these days. He could screw kick at the age of something like 9. In fact, I'd go out on the field, because I was playing with Newport then, and if I wanted to kick about on the field, I'd take Lee out with me. Sometimes in a lunchtime, I'd say to him, bring your kit, because he could actually add strength to kick a size 5 rugby ball back to me. So anyway, at about the hour mark, the tannoy, I could hear the tannoy system. The tannoy systems guy on the tannoy says, and replacing Gareth Thomas for Wales, number 23, Lee Byrne. And I'm thinking, I knew it was on the cards to happen, but I'm thinking this kid is coming on now to win his first cap for Wales. He didn't start playing semi-pro rugby till he was about 23, 24. He's come swum against the tide all his life. Played for Patondi and Bridgend Athletic, which is a great club. And all of a sudden, he's running on the field playing for Wales. And I felt like I was part of his cap, I felt like because I've been his under-11s teacher. And so they came over to me for an update. And I said, and I was quite overcome. The producer said, the presenter said, Con Murphy was the presenter. He said, what's the score now, Phil, at Millennium Stadium? I said, well, New Zealand is still leading Wales by 45 points to 3, but never mind about that. A guy who's just come on for Wales at fullback, this replacement, nobody had ever heard of in Ireland. I said, and it's Lee Byrne from the Scarlets, and it's pointed to me because I taught him at St Mary's Roman Catholic Primary School in Bridgend. Well, and I told the story that I just told you. And fair play, from Dundalk to Dublin in Ireland and all parts from Limerick, and they must have thought, who is this mad Welshman? This kid he taught, But fair play to the presenter. He sort of shared in it. When they went around all the other grounds then, the football and whatever, they all sort of said, oh, congratulations, Phil, you must be very proud and everything. Byrne being an Irish name, of course. So I'm sure he's got some Irish antecedents in his family. But that was quite poignant as well, because, as I say, I felt that I played a little bit of a part in him getting the cap when I was there to see it. Basically, when you're reporting, it's it's a job. It's the same as people say. Well, what about if you have to interview Richie McCaw, or you have to interview Alan Wynne Jones? Do you ever sort of get starstruck or want to ask for their autograph, you know. And working in the broadcasting industry, if you have to interview Richie McCaw or David Beckham or they're just a subject that you have to do as part of your job. And all you're thinking of, I think, you're not thinking it's Alan Wynne-Jones there. You're just thinking, well, what did he do in the game? What question have I got to ask? I'll listen to his answer. I've got to do it in 1 minute because they're tight for time in the studio. You just think of the professional things, you know?
Yeah.
And it's only looking back, perhaps, you know, a few years later, you think, oh, well, yeah, I remember interviewing him, or he was a nice chap. So, and the same goes for games as well. It's you can go to it's easy to report on Wales when you've got and commentate on Wales when you've got 70,000 there and everyone's carried away by, and you know all the players, and it feels like a good game, even if it's not, because of the atmosphere and the occasion and everything. You learn your craft as a broadcaster by going to perhaps Kamal and Quinn's. Nothing against Kamal and Quinn's, against Abervale, nothing against in the Premiership, and it could perhaps be a dour match, and you've got to find something interesting or useful to say. But so every game, like when you're a reporter, when you're a commentator, every game is the most important one because it's your next game, you know, and you're only as good as your last game.
And you followed the Premiership since it started in 2003. What are your best memories of games as a pundit in the Premiership?
I loved the fact that my favourite one was on a Sunday at Sardis Road when Abervale won it back in 2017, was it 2016? It's all sort of merges into one now. And Abervale, they're one of the great clubs of Welsh rugby. They've got great support, great people working up there. And they won the Premiership that year. They came through the hard way. They won it in a playoff at Pontypridd, against Pontypridd. And I just, that day, the way they brought loads of supporters with them, and it showed that, okay, the Premiership is much maligned and nobody's still quite sure what it's for. But that day, the Abervale fans, the performance of Abervale was terrific. That's probably the game that sticks out in my memory most.
And what do you think the purpose of the Premiership is? Do you think it's for developing young players, or do you think it should be completely separate and just like the top of the community game?
Right, that's a great question. We could be on this for 3 hours, right? The first thing I'll say about this, and don't get me wrong, I love the Premiership. You know, I cover it most Saturdays. I love the fact that I love the grounds, the old grounds where I played. I love the colours, you know, the traditional colours. I love the characters, the supporters, you know, the characters, the quips you get. Nobody has seemed to have worked out what the Premiership is for, and we're going into the 18th season now, aren't we? This is my, if you had an ideal world, right? If you came down from Mars and you looked at the structure of Welsh rugby, a Martian would say, right, well, you've got X amount of money in the game. There is no way you can afford these 4 professional teams. Why don't you just have 2 professional teams, concentrate the talent in those 2 professional teams, let players then go and play if they want to play over the bridge in Bath, in Bristol. I know we've got the 60 cap rule. Let them play in Bristol, Bath, wherever they want to go, as long as they're playing a high level of rugby, and put all your money into those 2 professional teams. So to have 2 professional teams, then the Premiership, I would say, would work with an 8-team league, that will upset a few people I know, but this is the Martian talking. An 8-team league of high quality players. Those players in those Premiership teams, you'd have teams there made up of probably 6 or 7 internationals playing in them, where they weren't required in the 2 regional teams, the East and the West, or whatever, or the North or the South, whatever you want to call it, trying to be political. And then you'd have a really good Premiership of a really good standard with players played. So perhaps somebody who's not somebody who's an international in the blue set. I'm trying to think of a name now, but who's currently not not actually in the team at the moment, would play in the Premiership, and he'd be quite happy to play in the Premiership because he knows the standard would be good, and he knows that the press coverage would be good. It would be televised by terrestrial TV, and I think that would get a bit of an interest then, because not only would the standard be good, the stars would be playing, or the stars-ish players would be playing, and people could identify with the old clubs, And I think if we had that as the Premiership, it would be much more successful. But at the moment, it's neither fish nor fowl. It is a good tool for developing players, but not all clubs use it in the same way. And obviously, if it's a Premiership, and if I was a coach at a Premiership team, and you're playing in the Welsh Premiership, and you're playing for that Welsh Premiership trophy, you want to win. You want to win, and winning and development don't always go hand in hand. So in answer to you, what would I do with the Premiership? If things ever worked out that you'd have 2 regional teams, that's way above my pay grade, I would go with an 8-team Premiership, but I would have relegation, automatic relegation, so that it's not a closed shop. But we've got to get back to people, wanting to watch the game again, on 2:30 on a Saturday, because the one thing that hinders the Premiership is the crowds.
Yeah,
you can't mock up that. If you haven't got a crowd, there's no way of sort of dressing that up.
And what would you say the standard is like then in a purely rugby terms? How much would you say the difference is between Premiership rugby and regional rugby?
Oh, massive difference. There's a huge difference. There's no getting away from that. And there's also a very variable standard within the league itself. The top 6 is a lot different from the rest, really. Your Cardiffs, your Aberavons, they're of a higher standard than perhaps clubs sort of near the bottom. There is a massive difference, but it has got a part to play as well in developing certain positions. Say props, for example. Wyn Jones. It's no surprise to me that Wyn Jones is doing so well, because he would have played a lot of rugby in the Premiership with Llandovery at prop, where he is coming up against wizened old, seasoned old players who didn't make it at professional level, but will do a job, particularly and maybe not for 80 minutes around the park like a professional player would be, good in all aspects, but in the art of scrummaging, he could be more than a match for an academy or just a young prop, So it's good for developing. It's good for developing players in certain positions more than others, I feel. The other thing as well is it's all very well to have. It's all very well to say, well, why don't we play sort of A team matches against other regions? Yes, you'll be playing against better people. Better people, better quality players than you perhaps would meet in a Premiership. But there's nothing quite like wearing a badge of that club for Aberavon, or for Cardiff, or for Newport, or whatever. There's nothing quite, and knowing that there's something on the result, knowing that it is important to win, and it's not just a game to fund to develop, to further your personal development. And I think perhaps A matches don't have quite that competitive nature about them, because there's not really much on it.
Do you think like the regional youngsters benefit more from playing in the Premiership than in the A-League?
I just say that certain positions I would, and in certain matches, if you're going to play, say you play for Cardiff in a good Premiership strength Cardiff team against a good Premiership strength Aberavon team, that's good for development. But maybe it's not if you're playing in a 62-5 win over one of the lower clubs, So, and again, going back to my 8-team Premiership, and I'll get a bit of the tin hat on for this one, because how you would arrive at those 8 teams in the first place would be another 3-hour debate. But I think if you did have an 8-team Premiership, given that you've only got 2 professional sides, as I said, that would be great for development then, because you'd have the elements that we just talked about. You're playing against internationals on the opposite side. You are playing in a league that means something with relegation. There's a trophy on it. You are playing for the club, for the badge. You know, one of the anomalies of the Premiership, was it 2 seasons ago, 2 seasons ago, I think. Tom James, the former Wales winger, when he stepped, in his last season before he joined the Scots, he played for three. He played for Cardiff. He played for Pontypridd. He played for Merthyr. Now that can't be right, can it?
No.
So again, we're back to is it fish or fowl? We're back to this thing. Nobody quite knows what the Premiership is for, but it still could be better, and it's still got great potential.
Okay, moving on to Wales. We had our first win of the autumn on Saturday against Georgia. What did you make of the game?
It was a win. First of all, it's a win. One win on the trot. One win on the trot. What can I say about it? It was one win on the trot. A couple of young players blooded. I thought that Lewis Rees-Zammit, when Rees went one way, Zammit went the other, and Georgia were left having the hyphen on that break in the second half there. I thought he looked to the man of ball, and he just looks a natural international player. We've seen him at Gloucester. I like the way Callum Sheedy went. He looked very confident, and I think Johnny Williams as well looked pretty good. And then coming back, then you had Wyn Jones at front, and Jake Ball, I think, did himself no harm. So we blooded a few youngsters. We nilled them. We nilled Georgia, which is something. But everything is contextual, and you've got to look at the opposition that we were playing, Wales were playing, and you've got to look at the opposition that Wales are playing next up. I think that the crowds doesn't help Wales, the lack of crowds. I think I'd go green against what a lot of other people think here. I think we'd have beaten Scotland with the crowd. I know the performance was not great, but I just think 72,000 in the stadium, and you get the odd penalty and a shove on the scrum, and you get a couple of points, and the crowd. I do think there's that element, and I think that the fact that we're playing England next week at Parc y Scarlets with no crowd, I think would be more helpful to England than it is to Wales. If we were playing in the stadium as underdogs, you know what we like with Wales when we're underdogs, particularly against England, and perhaps you get an odd penalty at the start, you go 3-0 up, and perhaps England make a couple of fumbles behind the scrum, and the crowd starts to go. But I don't think there's any chance of that. So I fear that England will win comfortably. And yet there's a feeling amongst Welsh rugby fans that because there's no crowds, it doesn't really matter. Do you get that feeling? Because there's no crowds, it doesn't really count. It's not Six Nations. I know there's a trophy on it, but it's sort of as if it doesn't really count. It's sort of like almost taking part in a parallel universe.
How do you think Wales will approach the game then, in terms of personnel and in terms of tactics?
I think you go with a good pack. You go with you'll have Alan Wyn Jones with his ankle. So I think with Alan Wyn Jones, you'd probably go for Jake Ball, Wyn Jones. I would go for Elliot Dee at hooker, because he's quite lively around the field. And then I think I'd have Callum Sheedy. Lloyd Williams is the best scrum half at the moment. He's not the future. He's probably 29, but he's been playing brilliantly. But I think I would probably have him to start, and then go with a few youngsters. I would put Zammit on the wing again, Josh Adams on the other wing. I'd put Liam Williams at fullback. Just have a go, have a run at them. Probably put Johnny Williams in the centre. I don't think John Davis is fit at the moment. So give the boys a go. Let them see what it's like. I mean, especially with and Rees-Zammit, they've played against these England boys, every week in the Premiership. So they shouldn't have that. They shouldn't have that fear factor. So I think we'll see. Yeah, and then just get stuck in. Just get up their noses and but it would be easier with 72,000 behind us.
And what are your thoughts on Byron Hayward leaving as the Wales defence coach?
Yeah, I've known Byron, actually played with Byron at Newport when he first started his career. You won't meet a better, hard-working, more hardworking, genuine bloke. Never mind about rugby bloke than Byron. He's absolutely diamond of a man. He would have been disappointed with the way the defence was operating, knowing Byron. I think he's a bit unlucky. I think he's been thrown under the bus a little bit. I mean, whether there was a bit of player power involved, it seems like Wayne Pivac consulted his senior players, and maybe. But what wouldn't surprise me about Byron? He's such a genuine man that if Wayne had said to him, "Look, Byron, it's not working out. We're struggling a bit. What do you think?" And if Byron thought that by leaving he could improve the Welsh team, that would be Byron. That would be typical of Byron to do that, you know. So that wouldn't surprise me if that happened. I do feel sorry for him because he was taking over from probably the greatest defence coach there's ever been, really, Sean Edwards. You know, his record speaks for himself. So it was a very difficult gig in the first place for Byron to take over. But I'm sure he will return at professional rugby because he's a well qualified and experienced coach, and he's done Wales under 20s and that. He's come through the system and everything. So I'm sure he will get something else. I hope so anyway, because he's a genuine Welsh rugby man, and we can't afford to lose people like that.
Who would you like to see come in as defence coach now that Byron's left?
That's a very good point. There's two that stand out. I'm going to go for a Welshman as well. Two Welshmen. The two that stand out. One is Mark Jones, who's done great work with the Crusaders, winning the Super Rugby. I'm sure Mark, if it was a chance to come back and work with the national team, I know he's part of a very successful setup there. I think he would be a good choice. And my other one would be to have a look at Steve Tandy, who's doing great things with Scotland, came through the Ospreys, coached the Ospreys. I think sometimes in Wales, we're a little bit quick to jettison and perhaps look down on our own coaches. You know, if you speak with I've spoken to many people about this, and it seems that if you speak with a Southern Hemisphere accent, you're regarded as, oh, they must be good, you know, they must be good because they're Southern Hemisphere. But I think in Mark Jones and Steve Tandy there, they might be two worth having a look at. But the best one could well be under their noses in Gethin Jenkins, who's worked in the Premiership with Cardiff. I know he's doing the breakdown at the moment, but players who played with him and know him say that in terms of thinking about the game and analysing the game, particularly with regards to defence, there's no one better. So three there, and they're all Welsh.
You mentioned Steve Tandy. Obviously, he left the Ospreys and he went to the Waratahs in Australia before coming back to Scotland, and now he's got another top job as a defence coach. What do you think's next for Byron in terms of, do you think he goes away and comes back, or do you think he'll get a job straight away somewhere? Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if Byron spends a year or two perhaps in the English Championship.
Yeah.
You know, if there's anything going there, possibly in the English Premiership. It depends really what he wants to do. Does he want to stay in the UK? Does he want to stay in Wales? Does he want to try his luck overseas? You know, like Mark Jones has done and Steve Tandy did. But I think he'll go somewhere, and not necessarily just defence.
Yeah,
I think he became Wales defence coach because he was doing defence at the Scarlets. But I think he'd be just as competent, you know, coaching the 3/4 line or what have you. It's the defence is one of those things where if your 3/4 are not firing, it's not nice. It's not pretty to look at from a spectator's point of view. But it doesn't necessarily cost you points, does it? If your defence is all at sea, it costs you points and loses you games. And that's why the defence coach often can be in the firing line even before the head coach.
That's a wrap then for episode 13. Thank you for coming on, Phil.
Thanks very much. Keep up the great work, boys.
Cheers. It's been a pleasure. Remember to follow our Twitter at WelshPremPod and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Looks like a check.